What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Show. I am Keith Niebuhr. That is Zach Albaverde. We've got a lot to talk about. As usual, it's never dull in Gainesville, Florida. It's never dull covering the Florida Gators athletic program. We've got some interesting stuff to discuss this weekend. A huge official visit weekend. Baseball season ended. We'll do a little wrap-up baseball segment. And then we've got some other things to discuss as well. But as always, we begin the show by going to our big sponsor. So, Zach, take it away.
Absolutely. Want to give a shout out, as we do each and every week, to Big Game Football Factory. And as you see right there, that big fancy football is what the Gators are going to be playing with during their 2025 season. And you can get your hands on it if you head over to biggameusa.com/Gators. Use the code Gators online. You can get 10% off your entire order and free shipping for a limited time. The Gators designed this ball with Big Game USA to ensure they're comfortable with it. So it's truly one of a kind. And you can start your collection of Florida's official game balls today at biggameusa.com/Gators, and make sure you use that code Gators online.
All right. Zach, again, we talked about it earlier. I mentioned it. We got a big official visit weekend. Florida hosted a handful of officials in the mid-May. And then last weekend had a bunch of guys on campus, and we've seen an uptick in Florida Gators recruiting.
No doubt.
They've got a little momentum right now. And with another big official visit weekend coming, we're going to bring on Blake Alderman, our coworker at Gators Online. And Blake, before we talk about this weekend, we got to talk about the weekend that just was. And Florida has already picked up 2 significant commitments from that event, and that gives them 4. That's still not a lot, but it wasn't that long ago when Florida had 1 commitment in this 2026 class, up to 4 now. The latest to commit, 3-star interior offensive lineman Janari Carr out of Bradenton IMG. Actually, he's from Ocala. And then the second one was Caden Hall, 4-star safety from the Panhandle, Florida. What do you think about these 2 commitments? And then we'll talk about the weekend that's coming, Blake.
Well, I think whenever you look at Janari Carr, 3-star ranked, but he's a guy that was a top target for Florida on the interior part of the offensive line. They're losing 2 guys on the interior part of the line. If you count Cam Waits, he's a guy that can play a little guard, can play a little tackle. I think most fans would like to see him stick at guard. But then you've got Damian George. This is his last year too. So Florida needs to really address anywhere from left tackle all the way to right tackle. So you get a guy in Carr that is a top target for Florida at the interior offensive line. And I think it's notable that going into this OV, he had a commitment date for June 25th. He takes a visit to Florida. Mom is known as being a Florida fan. He grew up in a Florida household. Being from Ocala, that's not shocking. So it's notable that Florida was able to get a guy to move up his timeline a couple weeks there, go ahead and pop on the visit. Now, I guess you could say the same thing for Caden Hall, the 4-star safety out of Milton, Florida. He had a commitment date previously for July 5th. Well, he decided he saw enough on his Florida visit. He came out of that visit saying that Florida was a leader. I believe they offered him in the summer of 2023. So it was like in between his freshman and sophomore year. He's kind of, I say a tweener, but he's clearly a safety. But he does have some size to where you could do some different things with him if he grows into a linebacker potentially. He's got a big, thick frame, so he can even play some maybe box safety. You could drop him back as a true safety. They said that they wanted to start him off. Florida co-defensive coordinator, safeties coach Vinny Sinceri sort of explained to Hall that he'll start out as free safety. And as time goes on, as he continues to learn more of the playbook and feel comfortable, then they can do a little bit more with him, whether that's strong safety using in some sort of, box roll where he can use his physicality. So I think that it's key pickups because, Florida needed an interior offensive line. They need all sorts of offensive line. They want to sign 5. So that makes Carr a big get. And then at safety, Florida, they had a really good class in 2025. You signed 4-star Lagonza Hayward. You signed 4-star Drake Stubbs, both of those guys that essentially flipped. Stubbs was an outright flip from Miami to Florida. Hayward was a longtime Tennessee commit, eventually backed off, and I think a couple days later was signing day in the early signing period. He picks Florida. So if you want to count that one as a flip, it's close enough to where you can really count both of those as a flip. But Florida needs to continue to keep adding safeties to the room. So they really liked Hall. He was injured as a junior. Missed, I think, from like November to the rest of the season. So he's coming back from injury. He's fully healthy. So he's a guy that could potentially rise up the rankings. Early in the recruiting cycle for 26, he was a guy that was ranked very high. He continued to everyone sorts to catch up. Your new guys pop onto the rankings. Guys have body changes, all sorts of things. So I'm interested to see what maybe a good senior season, if he can stay fully healthy, if he is truly fully back, what he could potentially do in the rankings. But Hall is now Florida's top ranked commit in their class. Janari Carr is a guy that is an important guy. He's a top target for Florida. He's got that flexibility to play left and right guard. So Florida has 4 commits. They've got a long way to go to continue to fill up this class, but they're certainly building some momentum as they continue on to these next 2 official visits weekends, this weekend and next weekend, where they've still got a boatload of kids coming to town.
Circling back to last weekend again, guys that you think maybe should be on all of our radars, Zach, me, the fans, everybody listening and watching from the weekend that just was, who were maybe a couple guys that you think they got a real good shot with? They're in great position with coming out of that official visit weekend.
You know, I think I said heading into the OV weekend that this was one to where if we look back, whether we look back now or we look back way down the road, that of the 16 guys that showed up at Florida, I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to land most of them. I think that this was a weekend that we look back and we're like, man, this was like a good draw for Florida. So it sort of backed that up coming out of the weekend. I feel like most of the kids, at least the majority of them, either had Florida leading and still did after the visit, or they had them as their number one coming out of the visit. Vodney Cleveland, I think, is one of the notable ones, the 4-star defensive tackle out of Birmingham Parker. He had Florida after the spring game in April. He named Florida his number 1 school. Texas had some buzz. They hosted him. He's still got some visits left, including an official visit to Texas. But after his official visit this past weekend, said Florida was his number 1 school. I view that as a Texas-Florida battle. Another guy that named Florida number 1 after his visit, that is also what I would view as a Texas-Florida battle, is 4-star defensive lineman Jaraylen McCoy out of Tupelo, Mississippi. He has some flexibility because he can play a little bit of everything. He can play the F. He can move anywhere from the 3 to the 4 as what Florida calls the end position in their defense. He's a guy that they really like. He is like a cyborg, man. He's built like he's like 6'6.5", almost 7 foot. I mean, he is a dude that is long and big. Like, that is just a big body human that Florida clearly likes in their on their defensive line. Hezzy Kent, 4-star tight end out of Brunswick, Georgia. He's a guy that didn't want to do an interview, but the intel we've gotten is Florida, Miami are probably the 2 teams to watch right now. He's got a commitment date for July 12th. We think Florida's in a good spot for him. And then, I mean, just running down the list of guys that said Florida was number 1 that I think you have to consider to watch. 4-star cornerback CJ Hester out of Cocoa. He's had Florida leading. He will make his commitment on July 1st. Florida is still a leader. 4-star linebacker DQ Forkpa out of IMG Academy, but he's originally from Hodgson, Georgia. Made that move down to Florida, I believe, earlier this year to attend IMG Academy. Another guy that had Florida number 1 going into the visit. That's still the case coming out of the visit. Blaze Thomasay, he's listed as an offensive tackle on On3 out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a Catholic high school, but Florida likes him as a center. I think that they're okay with letting him continue to play out his visits as they look for other center targets that they'll have visit these next 2 weekends. But he's a guy that did name Florida his leader. Jabari Lucas, a 3-star offensive tackle who has some position flexibility, that can play some right tackle. He can play some guard. He's out of Belglade, Florida Glade Central. He's the cousin of Kelvin Taylor and Fred Taylor. Has a commitment date for July 1st. Florida, I was surprised that he left his visit uncommitted. We have been told that he's got the green light at Florida. We still can consider that to be the case, but he has a July 1st commitment date. We like Florida standing going in there. Those are some of the notable names that I think you could also probably throw in CJ Bronaugh. He's a 4-star cornerback out of Winter Garden, Windermere High School. He's committed to Nebraska. He's not really one to give up a lot. You know, he's a committed guy. He's been committed to Nebraska since November. We think Florida's in a good spot. He had a really good visit. He's in Nebraska this weekend for his official visit, and then we'll see Florida State and Penn State. So there are still some things to play out with his recruitment, but we do like Florida standing. I think those are some of the big names coming out of the visit that I think that Florida fans should continue to watch.
Zach, I asked Blake for 2 guys. He gave us about a dozen there. So.
You picked the big weekend, man. That one's the big one.
He just said that a lot of guys in this class from that weekend might end up in this class.
It was great. He had so much good information. I was able to go eat a sandwich really quick and then jump back on this.
Just wait until this weekend. I'll let you finish the sandwich.
Before we move on to this weekend, before we move on to this coming weekend, Zach, you want to add anything here? You got anything you want to ask?
No, honestly, I'm more interested in this weekend because I know it's not as big of a weekend, but I do think that there's some important visitors on that list. Blake, who kind of stands out to you other than obviously the 5-star receiver as some potential guys to watch that we've been talking along these lines with?
I think if you look at the edge group that Florida's got coming in, you've got 4-star Jake Krull, who is at IMG Academy. He's from the Orlando area originally. I believe he went to Bishop Moore before he transferred to IMG Academy. His dad went to UF. He's grown up going to games in the Swamp. Oklahoma has some chatter with him, but he's saying right now, at least, we'll see how OVs go and if they change that. But he's looking to commit sometime in October range in the fall. So he's one of the top edge rushers. Hezekiah Harris, who is an Auburn commit out of Huntsville, Alabama. He goes to Jimson High School, right there, not far away from Auburn. He's been committed to Auburn since last July, but he's still giving Florida a look. He's giving Tennessee a look. And I think KJ Ford, that's probably the one that I don't think Florida fans or just people in general are talking about enough linked to Florida. The RPM at On3 has him leaning pretty heavily to Texas A&M, and wouldn't be surprising for a guy out of Duncanville, Texas, a Texas guy, to have the Aggies in a good spot. He's an in-state guy, but we hear that Florida feels pretty good about their standing, and I think a large part of where Florida is in such a good spot, I believe that they have a chance, that they're realistically a factor for him, is Joe Hamilton, Florida's off-field recruiting staffer. He's had some time where he worked at A&M for a couple months after he left Florida. There was like an in-between stage that he was there. Now he's back at Florida. They have a really close connection. So I think that that's a guy that Florida really wants to make an impression on. So from the 11 guys in town this weekend, I feel like the edge group is deep and it's talented. These are some of the top ranked guys in the entire 26 class.
Blake, you mentioned KJ Ford, and I was looking into his recruitment the other day. You talked about Texas A&M. There is some chatter that Alabama and USC may actually be the two teams that Florida may have to contend with here, but they both have really deep edge boards. Well, I think he might be higher on the Florida board at edge. And sometimes you prioritize a guy a little bit higher than somebody else does. You may end up with the guy when it looks like he likes other schools more. So you just never know quite how these recruitments are going to shake out. Blake, are there 2 or 3 guys in this class? And the last time I asked you for 2 or 3, you gave us a dozen. But are there 2 or 3 guys in this class of visitors coming in this weekend where you think Florida is in the best standing for? I know you just talked about a bunch of guys, but is there a guy you say, a couple guys here, I think this guy's ended up in the class? I think they're really going to get this guy, or do they just have a lot of work to do with the guys coming in this weekend?
I think there's a large part of them that they do have some work to do. 3-star offensive tackle Chancellor Campbell. He's out of the St. Petersburg area. He goes to Lakewood High School, the school that Dante Fowler came from. So Florida has landed guys from Lakewood before. They've had some guys committed, but they ended up going elsewhere as it got closer to signing day. But he's a big body, man. He's an offensive tackle. He's 6'7", 6'8", somewhere around there. This is a large human. He's had some raw areas in his game, but he's someone that Florida has been pleased with his growth. Just the frame and the size, that's like a big ball of clay that you can work with. So I think that Florida's the team to beat there. Corey Bender and I both have RPM picks in for him. And I'd say that Kikua Amua, and sorry if I messed up your name, he goes by Rhino. So
sound like you got it right,
because I can say that one better. But Florida's been in a good spot for him. He was offered in December. He's been to campus. I think this is his 4th or 5th time that he's been there. And I think what is most notable is that, yes, he's at Bradenton IMG Academy now, but this is a guy that's from Hawaii, and his family still lives in Hawaii. And I believe by my count, he's had his mom and like sister and family with him on 2 visits. And these people are coming all the way from Hawaii to visit Florida. He's told me in the past that Russ Callaway, Florida's offensive coordinator, tight ends coach, is her favorite coach. It's his mom's favorite coach. So there's a connection there. I think that he's one that Florida is in good standing with. But whenever I think like, man, this is a guy from Hawaii, like he's looking at Washington, he's looking at Cal. He's already visited North Carolina, so there is some West Coast flavor in his finalists or in schools he's visiting. So I'm a little bit more wait and see with that, just because the distance, is that going to become a factor? But I think those are 2 guys that Florida can definitely get if they continue on and they're in a good spot.
Keith, how do we get Blake out there to visit his high school?
We don't. You and I go. Well, he's at IMG now. Do we know what high school he went to out in Hawaii? I mean,
I don't think so, but I can check and see.
There are a couple prominent programs out there. St. Louis High School, I think, is the big one. Hey, Blake, Darion Williams, the FSU receiver athlete commit, he's coming in this weekend, correct? Am I right?
Yes.
There?
Yes.
Okay. Did you mention him earlier?
I didn't, but I think Florida is in a good position for him too.
Okay, making sure I didn't totally gloss over him. So that's an interesting one, because, and I wanted a 2-part thing here. Do you see, like, obviously Florida's only got 4 commitments, but it feels like they're in how do I put this? That you look at the receiver position. Darian Williams is a receiver committed to FSU, but it feels like if Florida really pushes for him this weekend, they're going to get the guy. And I think it feels like they had to work a lot harder a year ago at this time for these things. And now it's like, now they're having to actually, this is a good problem to have. It feels like that they're like, and I always hear this about Georgia, they've got tough decisions to make. And what that means is, hey, you're recruiting 12 receivers, you only got 3 spots. You now, because you've been winning, because you've got a quarterback that can throw, the shoe's kind of on the other foot. You're the one that's holding the cards, so to speak, and commit.
Sure.
Are you getting that sense at all, Blake, that Florida has more of those situations this cycle? I mean, again, they only have 4 commitments, so people may think, Niebuhr, you're full of it. But are you getting that sense? Are they in a better position now in that regard than a year ago at this time?
I think so. I think whenever you go through the spring and then even the summer with official visits, it was always like an awkward type of feel whenever you're interviewing someone. They're like, yeah, man, I really like this at the visit. This stood out. This coach, I had a really good relationship. But what happens with these guys in the season? I want to see what happens in the season with Florida. There are still some kids, I'm sure, that still kind of feel that way because, yes, Florida really ended on a hot streak last season after starting off on a little bit slower and dropping some early games. But now we're not seeing that as much. I think that some people, or at least some of the recruits, are kind of riding that momentum wave where Florida was winning some games there to finish out their season, where they were flipping guys left and right. I think most of the kids, at least, are kind of focused on where that's at and sort of the excitement. And I think you tie in DJ Lagway, like you said. You've got the former 5-star number 1 ranked quarterback out there. He had a strong freshman season, showed some promise, and obviously you have to back that up in year 2 with him. But I think that even offensive guys, defensive guys are interested in that too. If you're a defensive player and you're out there and you're, going crazy, you're trying to like bust every play to try to, get the offense back on the field. Some guys are like, man, like the offense is dragging. Like we're out here like killing it. I wish I would have went somewhere where the offense is helping me out here. And I think that you look at that and you have a general type of quarterback like DJ Lagway, so you have some promise. And clearly offensive guys are going to be interested in that. And we've just continue to hear, whether you're a wide receiver, you're an offensive lineman, or just an offensive guy, that having a chance to play with DJ Lagway, even if it's going to be a couple years, is something that's interesting to some of these recruits. So I think that gives a feather in the hat. How Florida finished out this past season sort of got that dark cloud that we saw in summer OVs. And we saw that dark cloud was cleared out with the vouching of Napier, how they played, because some of these guys that were saying that, like Drake Stubbs is the one that comes to mind. He all off season before this past season, man, I want to see what Florida does, what they do. Well, he ended up flipping. Now he's in the class and he signed, and here he is. So I think that we've seen that start to dissipate, of just guys that are sort of in wait and see mode.
He mentioned the FSU commit, Blake, but there's obviously 2 other receivers visiting this weekend, the 5-star as well. Wingo, another in-state battle for the Gators. What do you think about just that group specifically coming in, and then just the wide receiver board that Florida has? It's crazy to think that that's a big position to need given the class that they signed last year, but they do have 2 seniors that they're losing. So they got to add some guys at that spot.
Well, I think what stands out to me most about wide receiver is that you've signed Dallas Wilson, and yes, he looked good as advertised in the spring game. You signed J. Michael Sturdivant, who was, from the intel, it sounds like he's a guy they're pleased with what he's been doing so far since he's gotten there. That's 2 big body guys. And you signed Muiz Tonkara this past cycle. He's now moved in at Florida for the summer. But that's really 3 big body guys. And J. Mike is one you're going to lose after this year. He's essentially a 1-year rental. So you need to continue with those big body, 6'4", 6'3", and up type of players. So we're seeing Florida continue to recruit those guys. Keith and I saw Sadarian Morgan whenever he was there, and I believe it was April or March or something. That guy looks like he is 40 years old, like with a mortgage and 3 kids and all. Like, this dude looks like what you would think that a wide receiver that Florida wants, that big body, thick type of player that, just is kind of a bully. Like, he can take the top off. He can moss you in the end zone with those 50-50 catches. So Alabama has some chatter with him. I believe he's from a household where there's Bama fans. He's an in-state guy. Auburn and Alabama, it's kind of been viewed as that's the battle that they're going in between. But Florida, we've talked to some people that are around the program that they think that if some way he were to leave his home state, that they think Florida would be in a good position if he could do that. That's a big if, though, clearly, because I'm sitting here saying that Alabama is viewed as the favorite. But Florida seems to at least have some realistic interest from his end. Samori Wingo, I think that's a Florida-Miami battle. He said in the past to us, I believe it was in March when he visited last for a junior day or a spring practice, that he's interested in staying in state. He's already visited Miami. He's be at Florida this weekend. And I believe Alabama and South Carolina are his other two official visits. So he's got some things left to play out. I think it's positive that if you're Florida and you view Miami as who you're battling, that your visit is after theirs. So even if they did build up any sort of momentum, Florida can have a chance to swing that back. And with Darian Williams, who Keith mentioned earlier, I do think that if Florida wants him, that I think that there's a good chance he ends up at Florida. He's interested in DJ Lagway. That's an appeal to him. He's also teammates with Waltez Clark, who goes by Duke now. Sorry, Duke, that just signed at Florida this past cycle. So he's got a guy that he's familiar with, that he's friends with. He's able to ask him about what it's like at Florida being a freshman, how his development is. So it seems like Florida, we kind of know who the big body guys are, the Cedarian Morgans, the Marquez Daniels, the Calvin Russells, those types of guys, those big body wide receivers. To me, the more tricky part is sort of predicting where they're at with these slot types, because there's an amount of guys that maybe they're not a true slot guy, but there's someone that's maybe like a 6'1", 6 foot type guy that can do sort of like the Ricky Pearsall role, where you can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide. There seems to be a little bit of a log jam there to me. So it's kind of tricky to predict, who's Florida really pushing for. I think that Darian Williams, if they do want to push for him, if they're going all out, just again, with Waltez Clark there, the interest in the program, just the role that they see him being able to play, being sort of that Eugene Wilson type of guy. I think that if they want to push the gas there, I think they have a great shot of flipping him. It's whenever you're committed to a school like he's committed to FSU, and you're showing up to Florida for your second visit of the year, and you're leaving saying, man, it's tied 50-50 at the top. If you're Florida State, you're not really loving hearing those comments, but they do get the official visit on that weekend of June 13th after Florida. So if Florida's able to build any momentum, or if there's not something that's done this weekend, clearly that opens the door for Florida State to swing any momentum back their way. But to me, I think Marquez Daniel, the big body guy, I think that's a guy that it's Florida and Auburn. He's from Alabama. I think that there's a guy that just the ties there. He's connected with Chad Lucas, an off-field staffer at Florida. They are both from Tuskegee, Alabama. They both went to Booker T. Washington High School in Tuskegee, Alabama. So he knows his mother. So there's connections there. I think that that's maybe one that I feel that Florida, of those big body guys, that Florida probably, that would be the one I think they have the best shot with. It's a little trickier with the slot types.
All right. Blake Alderman, recruiting extraordinaire, Gators Online, works side by side with Corey Bender. They do a great job. Big official visit weekend. Everybody make sure you go to gatorsonline.com for all their great coverage this weekend. They're going to take you inside these recruitments. We say it all the time, but it's true. It's not just posting photos from Instagram. They're telling you who Billy Napier's riding over to the facility with in the car, which recruit he's sitting next to at breakfast, lunch, dinner, all the good stuff, who they're making a move with. So make sure you check out gatorsonline.com this weekend. Blake, you're off the hook. You can get the heck out of here.
All right, I'll quit talking to you guys. Ears off.
Yeah, get back to work, for God's sakes.
I'll see you guys.
All right, take care, buddy. Unfortunately, Zach, we still got time to fill. We got stuff
to talk about.
I don't know. What do you want? You want to do an ad read first?
Yeah, let me jump on another ad read real quick.
Yeah, kill a little more time here.
Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I'm on silent. All right. So let's jump to our boy Andy, since we're getting ready to get into some baseball talk here in a little bit, and it's obviously an important time. Even though Florida is not playing, they're getting into their portal recruiting, and you can help be a part of those efforts if you head over to myperfectfranchise.net. Andy is a big baseball fan, and from his line of work, he's seen firsthand the fantastic traits that baseball players bring to the franchise world. Andy's offering a donation of up to $500 to $1,000 to Florida's Baseball NIL Collective if anyone from our site purchases a franchise. We think it's a cool opportunity to help the baseball program, and now is the perfect time to contact Andy to learn more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you if you have any questions about business ownership with franchises. Head to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more, or you can call or text Andy anytime at 404-973-9901.
All right, Zach, we got to talk some Gator baseball. You and I spent the last several weeks touting this team. They were hot. They closed the regular season by, I think, winning 6 straight SEC series. Pitching staff was looking good. You had 3 good starting arms. The hitting was heating up. But there's still some injuries, and there were some injuries that the people were concerned about, and for good reason, some significant ones. And yet Florida was still getting a lot of hype going into the regional, the Conway Regional hosted by Coastal Carolina. People would identify them as a team to watch, as the number 2 seed that you did not want in your regional. And Coastal Carolina was put on upset alert and all that stuff. And to be honest with you, the season kind of ended with a thud, Zach. Florida lost 2 games to East Carolina in that regional, beat Fairfield, but the 2 losses to East Carolina weren't exactly what you can. Hey, it's baseball. It happens, right? Texas didn't get out of its regional, number 2 seed. Vanderbilt didn't get out of its regional, the number 1 overall seed. Georgia gagged again. But we're talking about Florida, and I think the expectation was that Florida would be a little more competitive in that region, or a lot more competitive.
No doubt.
So what happened? I mean, obviously the injuries, we're not sugarcoating things, but that's a real thing. It's a real thing Florida had to deal with. But they have to be disappointed with how they played in Conway.
Yeah, because I think that as much as the injuries, you knew Florida was going to have a hard time making a run, or maybe even making it to Omaha, which obviously turned out to be the case. You still felt like, to your point, Keith, that they were going to be competitive enough to potentially win that first regional, make it to a supers, make it interesting, just because of the talent and the guys that had stepped up in the wake of those injuries. But you got to say that you can't really point to the injuries as much with those losses that they had against East Carolina. Man, their pitching just did not show up with Peterson and Kapala. Those guys just did not deliver the way that Aiden King did. Obviously, that was against Fairfield. Competition was not the same, but still, he came out and put together another flawless performance. But the Gators did not get enough from the rest of their starters, and they'll get Peterson back next year, and he's certainly had his moments throughout the season where he's looked like that ace that Florida's put him in that position to be. But he did not bring that to the ballpark. He really didn't do as well, obviously, in the SEC tournament either. So it's disappointing for Peterson, Keith, because that's back-to-back years where he has not performed well in postseason play. So that's something that I'm sure he's going to come back trying to kind of fix that once he gets into the NCAA tournament. But it's just disappointing for Florida to kind of be right there, be in a regional where they felt like with the teams that they were matched up with, that they could get to the regional final and have a chance to advance. And that just did not come to fruition. I think obviously there were some errors that Florida had. Look, Luke Heyman being out is a big deal. It hurts them on offense. It hurts them at the catcher spot. I think Donay obviously had one of those errors or I don't know if it counted as an error, but he had that catch that he could have tagged the guy out at home and he dropped the ball. I think Luke Heyman is making that plays. And, I don't want to pick on Brody there because that's just one play. But that's one example where those injuries hurt Florida. And that's also catcher is a position that the Gators are going to have to address in the portal, which we'll get into. But really, it was a letdown from the pitching side of things more than anything.
Yeah, you look at the 2 games against East Carolina. They only played 2 teams. The game 1 against East Carolina, 11-6 loss. Then you beat Fairfield 17-2. Then you lose to East Carolina 11-4. 22 runs in 2 games against the same team is an awful lot, especially when you look at all the great pitchers that Florida's had through the years. And you started thinking in the last few weeks, Zach, that this staff, I said it last week, you're thinking, okay, they got 3 starters. How many schools have 3 legit starters? Not many. You got a closer, Clemente, right? You had some real potential, at least in your head.
Sure.
And quite frankly, they weren't particularly competitive in those 2 losses. I mean, they just weren't. And so it's back to the drawing board again. A lot of people say, well, that's just baseball. And that's true. I mean, look, you're not going to get to the World Series every year. We understand that. But I think if the games would have been 7-6 instead of 11-6 and 11-4, well, that happens. But those were a couple significant dings to the,
And they're disappointed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I want to add, Keith, is I know a lot of people have maybe mentioned, especially on our board at Gators Online, and I think probably on some sports talk shows as well, I would imagine, maybe question the decision to not start Aiden King in that first game against East Carolina and giving the ball to Peterson just based on the way King had been pitching toward the end of the season. He seemed like obviously he was pitching at Florida's best. I understand the decision there from Kevin O'Sullivan to stick with his Friday ace. One, because I don't think Kevin O'Sullivan would disagree with anybody that King was pitching the best heading into that regional. However, I think that he's thinking we're matched up with East Carolina in that first game. This is a team that we should beat. If we get the performance from Liam that we should win the game. Well, they didn't. But I think that he was saving Aiden King, Keith, with the expectation that they were going to beat East Carolina and then be matched up with Coastal, and he wanted King pitching against them. That's what I think is what his thinking was. And I know a lot of people were wondering why he didn't get that call in that first game. I think that was the thought process there.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but hadn't Peterson been pitching in game one of these series?
He'd been their Friday guy all year.
So, I mean, I don't know. Look, I mean, you criticize. Look, 11 runs is 11 runs. You know, you're open for criticism when you're the coach, obviously, and they know that. But that decision, it's tough. And what do you? I mean, you know, you're
at
trying
that
to
point in
play
the
things
year.
out. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to play things out. Imagine how hard it used to be to try to map out your pitching in the old 6-team regionals, Zach, where you didn't know you didn't know whether it was going to go this way or this way after the first or second game.
No doubt.
All right, so Florida they're doing evaluations with the players. You know, who's coming back, who's not coming back. So we're going to talk a little transfer portal here. And they picked up 2 pickups yesterday. Yesterday being Thursday. Notre Dame transfer pitcher Ricky Reith. Saw some clips of him on Twitter with some big strikeouts against teams like Clemson, and it looks like he's got some talent. And then a junior college catcher Florida landed yesterday, big bat. He's a catcher / DH. AJ Malzone, a Chicago native from Wabash Valley College. And I need to point out that in 2025, AJ batted .347, 10 homers, 58 RBI, .602 slugging percentage over 58 games. All conference, all region, and was also an all region Gold Glove winner at catcher. So a big time talent there. And then Reith, is coming off a season at Notre Dame when he went 4-2. I'm stealing all your thunder here, Zach, but I wanted you to talk about the big picture. Pitcher Reith was 4-2 last year, 4.31 ERA, 43 strikeouts against only 12 walks in 22 appearances, allowed 23 earned runs and 44 hits in 48 innings. So, hey, less than a hit an inning is good in college baseball. So right. It seems like a good start in the portal, but they got a lot of work ahead. And then you as a beat reporter have to figure out who's coming and going too, who's leaving and all that stuff. And they did have one player enter the portal, but it was a pitcher that hadn't played much, Zach. So what do we think about what Florida may need to do as it turns the page here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's a really good start to the transfer cycle so far. I think we should also mention that Florida's already had one outgoing transfer this week. Jacob Gomberg has entered the portal after his sophomore season. He only made 3 appearances for the Gators. He was coming off of Tommy John. So he's one guy that is no longer going to be with the team, and he was a left-handed pitcher as well. So as Pete Nakos has reported, Florida is, as we would expect, making pitchers a priority because of losing. We expect Billy Barlow and Pierce Capalla, though Capalla could return for another year. But Pete Nakos points out recently in his report at On 3 that the Gators are are highly prioritizing left-handed pitchers in the portal. And they have one guy that they are targeting. I'm not going to give away that name because it is behind a paywall.
Yeah, we got to make some money here.
Yeah. But if you want to head over and check out his story, Florida Baseball Intel, Gators in the mix for top transfers. The Gators are also in the mix for a catcher that is knows one of Florida's new commits very well. Let's just put it like that. So, and catcher is one of their top positions. In addition to the pitching spot, I think it's important that they got to get a Sunday starter. They got to figure that out, Keith, because Pierce Capalla, he went through senior day ceremonies with Billy Barlow, but he could come back. Does he want to come back? He's been through so many injuries. Depending on what what Florida has out there in the portal. Do they push for him to come back? It'll be interesting maybe to see what that looks like, because if he does move on, then one of their starting positions is open, and they got to get a guy that can fill that void. And I think another, priority position for them, Keith, is probably going to be shortstop, because the expectation obviously is that Kobe Shelton is going to turn pro after his junior season. So the Gators are going to have to replace a starter there, and I think that's a position that they could hit.
Okay. All right. Well, Zach, we can't talk about
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. We can't talk about baseball without talking about the situation in Conway,
Sure.
in Conway, South Carolina, involving Gators baseball coach Kevin O'Sullivan. And I don't laugh as it, well, I guess it is kind of fun. I don't know. I'm not trying to make too much light of it. It's an interesting situation where there was a time change.
It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, a couple time changes that really of games that really kind of got Kevin O'Sullivan.
The first one was significant. It was 3 hours.
Yeah, I'm going to let you do it in a nutshell. But there are two different time changes of Gator start times that Kevin O'Sullivan thinks, hey, threw off. They wasn't making any excuses, but threw off the rhythm. And you prepare to start at one time, and then you're all of a sudden your whole routine has changed. And he was really upset, and that's understandable. Now here's where people can debate, things, but he said some things to administrators at Coastal Carolina. Some of it's caught on video. There's accusations that he yelled things at East Carolina's players as well. And he ended up having to issue an apology, I want to say a day or two later. And Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland also issued a statement in the same release that was, hey, this is not who we as a university are, and Kevin O'Sullivan needs to be better than that. So a reprimand. What do you make of all this thing? Well, actually, first of all, Zach, just give us some details of what really set him off here.
Yeah, some background there I think is important, because it's not like he was going off for no reason. Their first game on that they played had been delayed for 3 hours. So they had already been through one delay. And then the second one was pushed back an hour. And you might say, well, hey, that's no big deal. But they find out the morning of, and they find out after they eat breakfast. And one of the big things that you were mentioning with the schedule, Keith, is the timing of things like that. They want their players to eat a certain amount of time before they have to play a noon or 1 o'clock game. That stuff matters. Their schedule of getting to the stadium, their schedule of everything with their operations guys. I mean, you heard Kevin O'Sullivan listing these things off. So it is an inconvenience, and it is something that could have been communicated a lot sooner to prevent that type of frustration from him and the team and everybody in the organization going through. But at the end of the day, I think that he crossed the line. Me personally, this is just my opinion. I don't think that the exchange, just from what I saw on video with the NCAA site reps, was anything completely or crazily out of line. He actually, for what it's worth, and to his credit, does apologize in the middle of this heated exchange and tells the guy, hey, I'm sorry, I appreciate you, but this is BS. And obviously he dropped a lot of F-bombs. Look, college coaches drop F-bombs, breaking news. I'm not going to get on any coach for something like that. He should, I think where he probably had to issue an apology and where he crossed the line was some of the other accusations that came out from the Coastal Carolina coach that said that he said something to their fields crew and their associate AD. And then there was an East Carolina player that came out and said that O'Sullivan was cussing at their teammates. Again, these are things that they're accusing him of. I wasn't there, and there's no video of it that I've seen, but they're coming out, obviously making statements. They probably wouldn't do that if there's something to it. So it was just obviously too many things that piled up, and it was just a bad look. I think if he had only said something to the site reps, even if he gave them a bunch of F-bombs, as maybe as much as that is probably a bad look on camera. Look, those are grown men. They are NCAA officials, they know that they're in the line of fire. They're involved in a situation like that. They're going to catch grief from coaches when something like that happens. And I think, again, you don't talk to an opposing team's players. You don't talk to Fields' crew or stuff like that. I think if those things happen, that's where he needed to come out and make an apology.
Yeah, and so it's disappointing. I don't really know him. He may be the greatest guy in the world. It's disappointing. But, as a university employee, essentially, I know he's hired by the University Athletic Association, but he's a representative of the University of Florida. A professor at the University of Florida, I don't think, could walk into another professor's classroom and cuss out that guy's students.
Sure.
I don't think a professor or an administrator at the University of Florida could walk into Tigard Hall and start cussing out people without there being some ramification. So look, I'm sure.
But to push back, like we know that coaches, they probably cuss at refs.
Sure.
You know what I mean? During the game,
Yeah.
it's a different arena.
It is. I understand that. But you have to be, and here's the biggest thing to me. It happens. Zach, you've seen me you've seen me very angry. I've seen you angry, and I've seen us angry at each other. And usually we end up having to hug it out at another time. But I think that, so again, this happens, right? And it's not necessarily representative of who this guy is, and maybe it is, maybe it is. I'm just saying, it happens. So I don't think, you apologize, you show some contrition, and you move on. I'm just saying that, as a representative of the university, I think what's happened is we've sort of let people kind of get a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse, like you said, in the arena, and then it becomes the normal behavior. It becomes this accepted behavior, and I think maybe it'd be nice to be able to go back in the other direction toward more civility.
To that point, I like I said, I've seen him go off on multiple umpires and seeing that language, and that it is the norm.
And maybe after the game, he's like, man, it's all good, guys. And you know what I mean? I look, I'm not trying to be too hard on him.
Again, because if you're on the court in March Madness, and you hear some of the stuff that those coaches say to refs, you know what I mean? I can only imagine what gets said on a football field. When somebody makes a bad call, it's tough. And it comes with that territory when you're dealing with coaches that, I think it's also you got to be more aware of your surroundings. You can maybe take them into an office or go in the dugout instead of doing it there. I don't know.
Well, okay. So here's the biggest problem to me. I mean, it happens. He exploded. He probably I'm guessing he feels bad about it, and he apologized. Okay. That's good enough for me. But as a coach, and the guy's a smart guy. Okay. I mean, he's a smart guy. Okay. You have to be smart enough to know that people are going to be watching your moves, right? Baseball coaches for years have wanted more and more attention for their sport. Now they're getting it. So now more eyes are on them, more cameras are on them. So you have to know that if you do something like this, even if you personally don't see anything wrong with it, that other people might. You have to be aware of how other people might perceive things. So that would be my talk with him.
And then you might get caught on camera.
Kevin, you're doing a great job. Look at the job this guy's done, quite frankly. It's pretty incredible, okay? You're going to have your hit. You can't get to the World Series every year. It's pretty incredible.
And to your point, Keith, that's what's disappointing about all this is it does take away from the season that Florida had.
About his career.
Turnaround.
Yeah. About his career this guy's having. People will forget about it. I mean, we're joking about look, I bet he's getting calls from his buddies that are coaches. Boy, you really went off on those people. You know what I mean? Like, it happens, man. It happens, okay? So that's what I want to say. So I don't want people to think I'm picking on this guy. He shouldn't have done it. I think when people are like, oh, don't be a snowflake. That has nothing to do with that. What happened to just a little more civility? There's nothing wrong with that. But he did it. It happens. Listen. Yeah. I have started phone calls with cable companies where I'm losing my mind, and by the end of the call, I'm apologizing to the people, okay?
We've all been there, Keith.
Yes. And unfortunately for him, it got caught on camera. Well, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, maybe this ends up being a good thing for him. I don't know. Who knows? But it happened. I'm talking in circles here. It happened. He apologized. Hopefully we can move on, and hopefully it doesn't tarnish anything he's done. I don't think it will.
No.
All those World Series appearances, the players say good things if they come back to you know what I mean? So like clearly he's done a lot of good things here. And what was Peter Work's great line when he got in trouble at FSU with the Dillard shopping spree? It's not like I shot the president. You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. Okay.
What a classic quote.
Yeah. All right. Do we got another? We're going to move on to the next thing. Or did you want to?
Yeah, we got another ad read, and then we'll talk
okay.
football.
Okay. So, by the way, Kevin O'Sullivan, again, it happened. Turn the page.
All right. Well, we're going to turn the page here on some Rowback gear, and you guys can head over to rowback.com and get your hands on it with an offer of 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Gators20. And there's only one way to describe Rowback. That's the best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with it, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rowback has released many items with their newly licensed game day collection, and it's fantastic. Novel polo designs, clean hoodie, and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Florida Gators. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear, and Rowback has proudly been leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code Gators20 on rowback.com for a generous 20% off. All new customers, that's spelled RHOBACK.com, 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Gators20.
Okay, Zach, we're turning the page again to football now. Do you want to go with the good news or the bad news first?
We'll say the bad news last.
Say the bad news last. All right. So most good old school football coaches say, hey, man, you got to build the team from the inside out. It's great to have Danny Werfel. It's great to have DJ Lagway, Tim Tebow, Steve Spurrier, Kerwin Bell, John Reeves. But if you don't have the guys on the interior, on the O-line and the D-line, you ain't going to do squat, right?
Yeah.
And the first 3 years of the Billy Napier era, there were some good players up front, but maybe not great groups. And the offensive line started to show real progress last year. And the defensive line started to show real progress last year. Offensive line returns 4 starters. Defensive line lost some guys, but has some key guys back. Now those 2 units are getting a lot of praise, okay? Pro Football Focus named Florida's O-line and D-line, both of them in the top 5 among those position groups in the entire country, okay? I think there were 2 schools that were in the top 5 of both and only 4 that were in the top 10 best offensive line, best defensive line. So now you go a year ago at this time, Zach, we were talking about that offensive line. Oh God, dear God, I wouldn't want to be the quarterback behind these dudes. To now, hey, this could be a legit group. We talk about the defensive line. We say, hey, they weren't good in the beginning of last season. They got a little bit better and a little bit better and then exploded in growth development in the latter part of the season in wins against LSU, Ole Miss, FSU, and Tulane. Now, a lot of progress and a lot of flashes, and they're getting a lot of praise, not only from Pro Football Focus, but my buddy, Cole Kubelik, an ESPN analyst who played center at Auburn, and he's saying, hey, he's ranking both these groups pretty high as well. This is, of all the things that people are talking about this offseason, DJ Lagway's health, obviously important. The receivers, the running backs, the linebackers, the secondary. This is pretty significant because, Zach, I'm talking on and on here, but we see Florida through the Florida bubble. People who cover all of college football, all of the SEC are now saying, hey, it ain't just you 2 guys that think they're pretty good. We're comparing them to what everybody else has. And guess what? They're really good. This is a positive sign for Florida.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is coming off of the 4-game win streak that you mentioned, Keith, and the way that those 2 lines performed down the stretch. People remember that. People remember that performance against LSU and the way that the offensive line blocked for DJ Lagway coming off of that hamstring injury. So it's really impressive what Florida's done kind of development-wise on both of those lines of scrimmage, because they've taken guys that they inherited and developed them into great players, and then they've also recruited at a really high level, and they have depth at both of those positions. I think that obviously you know what you got on the offensive line. You're replacing 1 starter, but the 4 guys that you got back, along with the depth that's been developed there's a lot to like. I think that Bryce Lovett is I think everyone projects is going to be that guy that steps into that right tackle spot. But they really like Caden Jones. They really like Roderick Kearney. They really like Cam Waits. They really like Fletcher Westfall. Like they're deep. They got Zandamela as well as now kind of working as their backup center. So, and you look at where those guys were ranked as recruits. I mean, we're talking about some of the better offensive linemen in the country in those recruiting cycles. So those guys have been in the system now. For DJ Lagway to have that type of a front for pass protection, and I think we're going to see him a little bit more mobile this year, not having to deal with that hamstring injury. I'm excited to watch what that line is going to look like. You got a great backfield as well that they're going to be opening holes for. So they are going to pave the way for Florida's offensive success. And, as Urban Meyer, famously said, if you got a great offensive line, you can do whatever you want on offense. And I think Florida's going to be able to showcase that. And then defensively, that is really kind of getting looked at with their front along with the edge spots, because you got to include Tyreek Sapp and George Gums Jr., who's, replacing Jack Pyburn and TJ Searcy at that Jack outside linebacker spot. But even as a backup last year, he ended up being a guy who finished second on the team in sacks and tackles for loss. And of course, he was behind Tyreek Sapp, who starts at that F spot. So those guys lead the way on the defensive line, along with Caleb Banks. You've got LJ McCray as a backup. You've got Cameron James as a backup. A bunch of exciting freshmen that they've got at those positions as well. The one spot that's the question mark, I mentioned right tackle on the offensive line. It'd be nose tackle on the defensive line. You're losing Cam Jackson. You're losing Desmond Watson. There's not an obvious proven player that is stepping into that starting role, but there's two guys that they really like in Jamari Lyons and Mekhi Barrow. I think that those guys are going to be the ones that they count on. I would project it to be Lyons as the starter if he's, full go from that season-ending injury that he had, and he's ready to go week one. I think he's your starter. But Mekhi Barrow, to his credit, he made a big jump in the spring. He was named the defensive lineman, the MVP of that position from the coaching staff with their spring awards. So that was an encouraging sign to see, because that is the one spot that's their biggest question mark on defense, in my opinion.
I need to clarify one thing. PFF, Pro Football Focus, has Florida in the top 10, top 5 as well of the units for both those position groups. Cole Kubelix was ranking top 5 in the SEC. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
Cole mentioned something pretty interesting. He said, listen, with Florida on the defensive line, I, being him, have seen the flashes. Now he wants to see the consistency, not just a play here, a play there, a series here, a series there. He wants to see it every play, every series, every quarter, every game. And that's really what separates the elite defensive lines from the ones that are even really good. I mean, are they going to be good, Zach? Are they going to be really good? Or are they going to be exceptional? And that's the difference. The Georgia, those couple national championship teams Georgia had, their defensive line was in the backfield every single play. They gang tackled every single play. There wasn't a play that they took off. So there's your measuring stick. The great defensive lines, the other great defensive lines from my college era, not playing as somebody drinking beer, watching football, was FSU. FSU in the 90s had just a ton of guys that were just pinning their ears back, getting back in there, creating havoc the whole game. Can these guys be that group? Well, we've seen it in flashes. That's kind of what Cole Kubelix is saying. We've seen it in flashes with Sapp, with Caleb Banks. But can they be more than just flashes? And if they can't, then Florida may win 7, 8, 9. If they can, that suddenly makes you think. If you have a dominant defensive front, you can overcome some lack of depth maybe in the secondary. You can that's where it all starts. So the second thing, Zach, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. I kind of have a feeling, I'm friends with somebody who's tight with George Gums, and they're saying, trust me, he's going to have a huge season. This guy may end up going down as the best evaluation of the first 5 years of the Billy Napier era, if he takes that next step. From walk-on receiver at Northern Illinois to scholarship player to tight end to defensive line to Florida. Crazy. I mean, it's an incredible rise, but there's still one more step to take. I mean, he was not a starter last year. He didn't have a dozen sacks. He's got to become that guy. But everybody thinks he can be. Zach, what do you think about George Gums? I think he's a key to the whole defense, man. I really do.
I mean, honestly, Keith, let's be honest. If not for him and his development, and kind of let's call it like it is, coming out of nowhere, LJ McCray is probably your starting jack outside linebacker right now. And I think LJ McCray is going to play a starter-like role and get a lot of snaps and be a guy that they use in a lot of different ways and on third down. But George Gums and his emergence and then his production is really kind of been one of the biggest storylines that they've had in the portal, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Caleb Banks has been pretty good too now.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good pickup from Louisville in that first portal cycle. And obviously he's got a chance to just skyrocket up draft boards. He's already getting first-round projections based on the way that he played at the end of the year. But, I mean, you pair him with George Gums and Tyreek Sapp, like that is a really impressive front. And I think Gums is just he's just kind of scratching the surface of what he can be still.
Of course, the problem with the defensive line, people are always talking about my hair, Zach, so I got to fix it there. But the problem with the defensive line is you find four guys that you just love, a couple edges, a couple inside guys. They can't play every snap, and so many people don't realize that. And I hate to be that guy that's like, oh, the people don't know. No, that's not what I'm saying. There's a lot of writers that don't know this too, a lot of reporters. You got to rotate. You need those guys fresh at the end of the game. But one thing I do know we can all agree on is you got to get off the field. You got to figure out a way to get out of those third and Grantham situations, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You got to get to the quarterback. You don't necessarily have to sack them, but you got to create some havoc that causes errant throws or a guy to take off and run. And if you don't have, look, all the great teams, every great Florida team had a dominant guy on the edge. They just did. They did. And that's what you need. And if George Gums can be that guy, that's why I think he's the one guy that could truly, Caleb Banks, great potential. But an edge can really impact things on the key down of the game.
No doubt.
So that's just my take there. Anything else you want to add? Or oh God,
I
forgot.
Yeah, we got to mention obviously before we get out of here. It's some unfortunate news this week. We kind of were waiting on this story and kind of showing respect to the situation because he is a juvenile. But Stephon Shivers was arrested last weekend. He's been placed on house arrest, which is typical for juvenile cases. And now we kind of have to just wait and see where this process goes. He's been charged with a third-degree felony charge for false imprisonment, and it's a kind of a dating violence situation with him and an alleged female victim. There's a lot of details out there I do not want to get into on this show. But we would be remiss if we did not mention it, talking about the D-line position and the nose tackle spot, because, like I said, that's probably one of the biggest question marks. He plays that position. I don't think that he was necessarily being counted on to be in the rotation as a true freshman. But nonetheless, he's got to get this situation resolved. Florida has put out a statement about this and said that they are aware of the situation with one of their student athletes, and they will continue to gather facts, cooperate with, and monitor the legal and administrative processes. And again, because he is a juvenile, you're not going to get a lot of information other than what's been reported by the Gainesville Sun, which has kind of had the lead on this. So that's where things stand. We'll kind of see what comes from this, but unfortunate for Florida because it's their second arrest in as many months, and just gives them negative headlines that they don't need.
Yeah, and there's my hair all messed up again. There's no winners in a situation like this, and so we don't want to ever make light of it. Just as the University of Florida football program has to kind of wait for everything to come out, we do too, and we'll cover it as we always do, and be as delicate to the situation.
Yeah, because they're all accusations, and we've already seen how some of this stuff can play out. So we'll let the legal course run its course and see what happens with Stephon.
Unfortunately for Florida, Zach, before we get going. Now, this is a couple arrests in the last month or so. Dijon Johnson, a defensive back, was arrested and is possibly facing some charges as well. So as a program, and that was down in Tampa, and we'll see how that plays out. But it's going to be so frustrating for a staff. You work 12 months a year. You work so hard to get ready for the season. You're trying to get these young guys to stay in line. And again, I'm not proclaiming guilt or innocence or anything like that. We're waiting for that to play out as well. But it's just, you're dealing with, you got 85 scholarship guys and another 20 walk-ons, and it's a tough business. It really is. And there's no, I know people get on these staffs for saying, well, we're going to wait till all the facts come out, but they really can't do anything but that, Zach. That's all they can do. I mean, their hands are tied, and they get to know these guys, and they're always going to defend them, and we understand that because you're around these guys all the time, and you're gonna think the best of them, and it really is a difficult situation. Like I said, no winners, and when these things happen at all. But again, we'll cover them the best we can and with as much care as we can to be fair to all parties. So, Zach, that is it. We good?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this recruiting weekend. It was great to have Blake on and have him kind of give us that rundown. And obviously, we will continue to track everything that's going on in the baseball portal. We just go from one portal to another, Keith.
Yeah.
Football, hoops, baseball.
Well, we hated to end on a somber note, obviously. That's not something we love talking about. We wish that never happened, but it's a reality of covering a beat.
We're also not going to ignore something that when something serious like that comes out, we have to report on it. And like I said, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. For Zach Albaverde, I am Keith Niebuhr. This was the Gators Online Show. We encourage you to hit the like button down below, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and make sure you go to GatorsOnline.com for more. Look, I mean, football season's right around the corner, and there's going to be a lot of juice over the next few months. Guys that we hear are looking good in off-season workouts. Zach's always on top of that. We got a ton of recruiting info, not just news, but a ton of recruiting intel to report in the coming weeks, because that class of 4 commitments is certainly going to grow, and probably by a lot in the next 3-4 weeks. So for Zach, I am Keith. We'll do it again soon. Take care, everybody, and have a safe weekend. Bye-bye.